All right. Good morning to you, Stock Showdown audience, and welcome back to another episode of Waking Up with Wandy, again, brought to you by the Stock Showdown. Excited again to be back with you. I had intervals there for the last 7 weeks where we were doing the Stock Showdown portfolio challenges. So again, I want to shout out to all my students for participating, whether again they had a choice in the matter or not. So they were all actively engaged. Hopefully they learned something throughout the process of the last 7 weeks. But again, given the volatility in the markets, it was not pleasant for all but one student. One student actually ended up positive for the 7-week duration. So we got to do that podcast this morning. It was exciting, again, to get with all the weekly winners and the grand total winner. So that's kind of, again, where my focus has been over the last 7 weeks. But now that has passed and the summer is upon us, we have 1 day until graduation, and these kids will be moving on to the next level. And I'm excited to see that for my students. But we're going to carry on here with the Stock Showdown and put some things together. Continue to work with entrepreneurs of all walks of life and get them on the show to get their insight on their backstory and hear more about the great things that they're doing in their respective fields, and kind of, again, what sort of advice they have to high schoolers growing up in this day and age about any field or just, again, the field of entrepreneurship. So without further ado, very excited to have back on the show. So we had him on the show, I believe, in November or December of last year, 2021. But we have Paul Barron back on the podcast here this morning. A little bit of background on Paul. He's a entrepreneur himself, works business to business to customer or consumer. That would be B2B and B2C for those that are in the industry. And hopefully my kids recognize those acronyms. But he's been involved in many different entrepreneurial startups. And the most recent one that he's been working on, very excited to hear about this one because I think there's definitely a tie-in that we can kind of relate to here at the technical school that I work at, which is Sussex County Technical School. And we have a wonderful new teacher in the graphic design department that I think it would be great that that individual, Mr. Steven Spots, and our guest here, Paul Barron, could hopefully develop a relationship and we can get the wall printer. That is why Paul is here to talk to us about his new venture called the wall printer. I'm going to turn it over to Paul because he can give you a lot more insight on what he's doing with the wall printer. So without further ado, we have Paul Barron, everybody, on the Stock Showdown podcast. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to talking again to you and your students and colleagues. It's a privilege to be part of this, especially going on into the late section of your school year where people are either graduating to their next year or moving on in their lives to either college or work experiences. And so it's an exciting time for everybody. And I wish everybody the best in that journey. Happy to give whatever perspective I can based on mine. I won't go back to Paul was born at a very young age since I'm 70 and we don't have enough time for that. But to your point, I have been a kind of a serial entrepreneur over the past probably 4 decades. After having some work experiences working for large corporations and others, I branched out on my own businesses, everything from restaurants to software, technology, consumer packaged goods. I found my niche. You have to learn early on, and this is not a cautionary tale, but just something to share with your audience that's moving out into their own career searches and paths. You need to find out what hats you wear well, what you like to wear, what you don't like to wear as you move forward in your career search and what that path is going to look like for you. Some people like to live in a certain place. Some are more comfortable in their hometowns. Some want to get away from their hometowns. These are all the decisions that your kids are going to make today as they move on. But ultimately, wherever you land, you've got to be doing something that gives you some satisfaction. I think it was Winston Churchill, if I'm correct, and I'm pretty sure I am, who's quoted as saying that success is measured by going from failure to failure with equal moments of enthusiasm along the way. And so if you can continue that enthusiasm and drive, and again, I measure that also by learning what hats you like to wear and don't like to wear. Early on, even though owning your own business means you have to wear every hat, when I was in the food service business and restaurants, I learned how to tend bar, how to wash dishes, how to cook, how to deal with people. The latter is what I enjoyed the most, the customer interactions, sales, marketing, and my businesses were successful when I usually stayed in my own lane. Again, another definition that I like to give, what's the best leader? Everybody says, "Oh, I want to own a company," or I want to be a CEO of a big corporation, or even my own small business. That's all well and good, but what does that mean? And for me, the definition of a good leader is somebody who's smart enough to hire the best people for the job that's needed, but wise enough to back off and just let them do it. And so that's something that I found early on. I wear the sales and marketing hats very well. Didn't like administrative tasks so much, didn't like financial tasks, didn't like team building. These are all things you need to be able to do to build a successful company. But sometimes at some point, you may want to back off and let a more qualified person focus on those areas. And then hopefully everybody stays in their lane, so to speak, and accomplishes what the business needs to thrive and what everybody else needs to thrive in that business. And so that's to your introduction, and I appreciate that. I have gone through various introducing foreign products over the last 30 years to the United States. I've found innovative products that I thought needed either a larger market share or just brand awareness, making people aware of things, from a self-service dog wash system to an interesting baby bottle from Austria, a dog wash system from Australia, a Chinese headband headphone, a communications software technology for audio, video, and navigation systems that came out of Russia. And all of these products or services, I help those companies find their audiences in the United States, help them build and scale. I retired a couple of times over the years, always drifting back because of restlessness and just wanting to be out there doing something that was interesting to me and to get me up in the morning, besides playing tennis and swimming, which are my two passions. But being 70 years old, I can only do so much of that before needing to take a nap every day. So I found a couple of years ago, back in 2019, a vertical printing machine, which I think of myself as a consumer, as normal or as mainstream as others. If I see something, whatever it might be, and it's something interesting and something I can see the value to me, my family, I may be interested in acquiring it if I can afford it. And again, if it means something to me, which is again something else your audience should be aware of if they're looking to get out into the business world and creating their own business, always have something that's providing a solution to somebody's problem. Don't just build a better mousetrap because you think there's a need for a better mousetrap. There has to be a real solution for a problem that people are having, and that's what I look for. And when I see something that I've never seen before, but it seems to fit a gap in the market, then I explore it further and I see what its potential might be. So a vertical printing machine, just to summarize what that is for your audience, is a printer, but unlike your desktop printer that might print on paper or poster board or something, this is a vertical printing machine that prints on any wall. People can go to thewallprinter.com and see videos, and in 15 seconds you'll get what it does. It's your desktop printer, but printing on a wall. And the wall doesn't have to be flat. It doesn't have to be smooth. It just has to be vertical. It could be stucco. It could be brick. It could be cement. It could be wallboard, tile, glass. Doesn't matter. As long as it's vertical, our printing machines will print on it. And they print on it with a type of quality ink that's like an oil-based acrylic type of ink that hardens. A hard shell, bright colors, will stand the elements outdoors, winters, hot summers, humidity, everything else. It'll withstand that 3 to 5 years outdoors without cracking or breaking down. And indoors, 13 to 15 years is what the inks are rated for. So it's a way to put digital art onto walls, in a nutshell. It is a machine, and we actually have a floor printer now too that we've developed and now it's generally available. It was after 2 years in development. We developed a floor printer, which uses the exact same technology, but prints on floors, whether they be concrete. It was actually originally designed to respond to the problem somebody had. Not that it may be a major problem, but people wanted personalized parking spaces in garages. And so we developed this machine to be able to use the technology that we use for our wall printer to do this on floors of concrete. And then it would extend it to foyers and tile and wood in buildings where a company might want their logo. We haven't tried it out on the bottom of a swimming pool yet, putting a big shark or something like that, but there's no reason it can't be used for that. And in fact, to that point, we learn more from our customers what the applications for these machines are because of what people want to do with them. One of our distributors in Naples, Florida, did a ceiling print for somebody, not because the machine can print on ceilings. They printed on some wood that was put up against the wall, printed a nice ornate picture, Michelangelo-esque, if I will, like the Sistine Chapel, if your students want to look that up. But he painted the ceiling. It took him years and years to do it, and it's a beautiful piece. Our machine took a few hours and printed on the wood, and then a general contractor came in and put that wood up into the ceiling and put the guy's molding around it, and now the guy has 2 rooms in his mansion in Sarasota, Florida, with 2 ceiling prints. So again, that's something we never thought of as an application, but our customers did. And it's a really cool machine. And what it does, again, in a nutshell, takes any digital art image and puts it onto walls. And again, applications, we have sold a machine to a school in Chicago, which is a STEM school, using it for that science, technology, English, math. And they're using it kind of to bridge the arts and the technology areas, using it as an example of a piece of equipment that people could learn, computers and technology, but also apply arts to it and to decorate the walls of their school and for backdrops for theater productions, things like that. So again, no limit to the applications that you can use as long as you can imagine art on walls. That's what it's for.
Awesome. Well, very thorough explanation. I'm sold. I can just envision my use out of it, both personally and professionally here at my school district. Again, like I said, we have a graphic design department, probably comparable to what you were saying with a STEM school. We're a CTE school, so a career and technical education school, where that's one of the pathways. And I think that this would be a game changer, at least in our area. I can envision the businesses in our local area. Actually, now that I'm saying it out loud to you, I remember distinctly a bowling alley in our town wanted to hire students to paint like a mural on one of the bowling alley walls. I think this would be something as an alternative that could be done in a fraction of the time. Now, my question to you is cost-wise. Cost for the actual machine, and then cost for, I guess, continuously replacing the ink, I would presume needed.
Happy to address those questions, but also you alluded to something which is interesting also, and I want to make sure that people understand. Muralists sometimes come to us, photographers, artists, and their knee-jerk reaction to the wall printer is, oh, you've got a machine that's going to, like other machines, take food off the table of those particular arts or those particular tasks, whether it be a plumber, an electrician, or an artist. Machines are sometimes frowned upon and looked at as a threat to existing disciplines and ways that people make their living professionally. Nothing could be further from the truth. What we envision for the wall printer and the floor printer is that it doesn't take anything away from the creativity. There's nothing creative about the wall printer. It is a tool to print on the wall. And again, this will be a way to answer your question about costs and everything, so I'm not going to go too far afield here, but I just want to impress upon anybody who looks at these types of machines that they're really designed to complement and enhance the creativity, letting artists and muralists and photographers and graphics designers focus on the creativity part. Because once you create that digital image, whatever it is, whether it's a mountain scene or portraits of people or dogs or landscapes or sports or logos, once you created that, all our machine does is it efficiently, accurately, and quickly applies it to a wall. And then getting into the cost areas of that, muralists, wonderful. They could spend days or weeks. You might be able to speak to how long it took to print that or to paint that mural in the bowling alley. But our printers printed about 20 square feet per hour. So just take a 5x8, and I'll use this to answer your question about cost. A 5x8 mural, which is relatively small, but just using that because the numbers are kind of easy. That's 40 square feet. So 40 square feet, 5x8. 40 square feet has about $10 worth of ink in it, $10 to $15, depending on the image. Ink costs anywhere from 25 to 45 cents per square foot. So a 40 square foot mural might have $10 to $15 worth of ink in it. And it'll take 2 hours, 40 square feet, 20 square feet per hour, take about 2 hours to print it. So whether you need to figure how long it takes to move the machine to that wall, maybe an hour or a half hour if it's in your school, or moving to that bowling alley. If you figure an hour to go there, an hour to go back, let's say an hour to set up and everything else, which it's not that long, but I'm trying to be generous with the amount of expenses. I like to be over the board on expenses, but under on revenue when I talk about, whether something makes business sense. And so let's say a total of 5 hours between printing, preparation, practice printing before you go to the customer site. Make sure the art does print properly the way that your customer and you envision it to meet your expectations. So 5 hours worth of labor at, let's say, put a number by it, $20 an hour, that's $100. And then another $15 for the ink cost. So that's $115. Typically our customers, meaning the people who buy our machines from us, they provide these services anywhere from $20 to $30 per square foot. So that 5x8 mural will cost a customer from anywhere from $20 a square foot for 40 square feet, $800 to $1,000 for that mural. That's a typical cost. Now that, very honestly, would probably take an artist, maybe depending on the image and how detailed it is and complex, could take anywhere from a day to 2 days for somebody to paint something like that. And their time is worth seriously more than $20 an hour, in my opinion, because they're professional artists with skills. And so if they're going to apply those skills on site and use their time, they're probably going to get somewhere in the $75 an hour range, which I understand is fairly typical, and possibly more if they're a well-known artist. So those are the alternatives, to this. And then there are alternatives also. People can say, well, why not just put up a vinyl sticker or put up wallpaper? Well, these solutions for adding art to walls do have their place, but vinyl is toxic. It's adhesive backed. It doesn't go on a lot of things. It certainly won't go outdoors on brick or stucco or something like that. And vinyl, as I mentioned, is toxic. If you use it outdoors, it'll run into the water table. So a lot of communities frown upon that. And schools and hospitals don't like to put vinyl stickers on because, again, it's vinyl and it's toxic, so it's a plastic. So the nice thing about the wall print is you don't like it. You grow up, you change your theme or your ideas. All you do is you primer over it and you start again, and you paint over it, which is a lot easier than removing a vinyl sticker with all that adhesive, or wallpaper, which is a real chore to remove those things to do something in.
Yeah, I've had to do that.
And then the machine itself. Of course, the machine itself is an investment. It's capital equipment. Again, for your business students, capital equipment is what we call a depreciable expense. So the cost of it is sometimes a little bit misleading as to what the real cost is after you talk about tax benefits and things like that. But the price of the machine is about $25,000 to $30,000. And so when you think of, let's say, leasing a car. So when I talk about investing $25,000 or $30,000 in something, and again, I caution people to know that this is not your $100 desktop printer. It's a much more complex piece of machinery. But for $25,000, $30,000, if you were going to go out and buy a car for that, you'd take a loan out or a lease, and it would be about $500 to $600 a month. Again, another exercise for your students to figure out how I got to that. But just take my word for it. It's somewhere in that range. $500 to $600 a month is what your expense would be for that money. So I look at things as what's the cost of money. Well, if you go back to that 5 foot by 8 foot example of a mural, if you can do one of those a month and get back $800 to $1,000, well, you've paid for your machine and your labor. And so that's kind of the break even in cost. If you can do one print a month, you could break even on the cost of one of these machines. If you talk about, leasing it or taking out a loan to buy that machine.
Well, I mean, you mentioned a lot of key business concepts in that response, so I do appreciate that. You could throw in compound interest, break-even analysis, financing, capital depreciation. So those are all really great buzzwords that hopefully my students will recognize and carry with them even after
that's
they
your area, and that's your area of expertise, Mr. Anderson. That's one of those hats I don't like to wear. So I let people tell me exactly all of those things you've just rattled off, and then determine whether or not it makes sense or not.
So my next question then is going to be twofold based upon some of the things that you just said, and this one actually goes back to your first response, and you were kind of detailing, you know, how you got into this industry and about wearing hats and things like that. And at what point in time in your first venture, if you can recollect back to that, and you were talking food services industry, when you recognize as an entrepreneur to delegate those responsibilities? Because I feel like at the very beginning, like you said, when you're first getting started and launching this venture and this new initiative, that you do have to wear all those hats. So if you can recollect back to the very beginning, at what point in time, length of time, would you say that you finally were able to start to delegate those responsibilities and relinquish some of those hats you were wearing? Because that's the struggle that I'm personally in right now, is doing it all myself and finding the right people to delegate those responsibilities to. So any insight is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, great questions. And, you know, the restaurant is a good example, and then I'll give you another one on the more technical side from a software company that I had back in another lifetime. And so in the restaurant business, it's a good example because all those things I did and that a restaurant needs to function, buying food, and forget about the normal business stuff of, you know, your rent and your expenses and your electricity and all of that and labor costs. But put that aside for a minute. But just the hats you have to wear just for the functions of that restaurant. You've got your food prep and your cooking. You've got your cleaning up and your dishwashing. You've got your service, bringing that food from the kitchen to a table, dealing with customers, you know, what they want, what they like, what they don't like, making recommendations. And then, of course, you know, if it's a bar with liquor and beverage service, you've got somebody performing those functions. And the reason I wanted to do all those things was obviously no one person can do all those things. So you've got to, at some point, delegate and hire people to perform those tasks. And hopefully the restaurant is providing the income to afford that. But just from a functional perspective, while you need to have all of these tasks performed, the main reason for me doing those things was that I just wanted to know what it takes to do those things. Because when you own a business, you really don't want anybody to know. You don't want people to really know more than you do, to the extent that you can't intelligently talk about, you know, what's necessary for them to perform their tasks. When somebody asks you for something and they say, oh, I need this set of knives, you know, in the kitchen, or I need this type of soap, or whatever we need, or we need to do a renovation and make this room larger. Well, the first questions are, you know, why? You know, what's the justification for that? You know, what's wrong with this knife that you have? Why do you need this particular type of one? And then if somebody says, well, the edge, you know, this is better for cutting this type of meat, or this is better for this. These are things I may not know, but you rely on the expertise of people who do, and maybe you take them to task to support that or prove it, so to speak. And then you go along with that and you make that investment, perhaps, based on the information you gather. But you need to know a little bit about a lot of things to own a business and to run a business, and to work with people so that they respect you and so that you respect them and their skills. And that's really important in building a team and in just letting that business function with all of the people and responsibilities that are needed to be successful. My software company is a really good example. My background was mathematics growing up. All the way through college, my first job was a high school math teacher.
No kidding.
That was my first job out of school. I went to school up in your neck of the woods, New Paltz, New York. Graduated with a Bachelor of Science and an education degree in mathematics. I got a job right out of college teaching high school mathematics in Wappingers Falls, New York. And I did that for 3 years before opening my first business at the time because I was also in college a tennis player and was captain of my tennis team, and I built a reputation for being a very good stringer of tennis rackets. And so after I graduated college, I opened a business stringing tennis rackets, which evolved into a sporting goods store. And I enjoyed the business of that so much that after 3 years of teaching, I gave up teaching career path to go into the business career path. And that was my first venture, a retail tennis sporting goods shop, which grew to 3 shops in the Hudson Valley, New York. And then I went on from there. But the point being that math background was always with me. And I had an opportunity later on. I'm not going to bore your audience with too much of the history of Paul Barron here. But suffice to say that I opened a software company in Florida. That was a software development company that solved a problem for a solution in the telemarketing and call center world. And without getting into the details of that, which I'm happy to share for anybody in the future who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I can always talk about this or anything else. I'm happy to have people reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect with me. But by this particular company, I knew enough from my high school, from my college math and computer science courses to know enough about programming, but I wasn't a real good programmer. It was nothing I ever concentrated on. But when I decided to create a company around a particular product that I thought the market needed, once again, a solution to a problem, I needed a programmer. And I kind of fancied myself as somebody who, while I don't do nor want to do the programming task itself, I won't be thrown out of a room with programmers who tell me this is going to take 3 years and $1 million to be able to create this app or this product when I know it's going to take about $500 and about 3 weeks worth of labor. So it's those kinds of things that you want to know, at least with some perspective to start the argument between you and those people who think they know it all, to be able to go ahead and perform a task to make your business successful or your job successful. I'm a total believer and fan of teamwork. The expression "teamwork makes the dream work" couldn't be more truthful. But at the same time, when you're wearing these hats, you want some level of expertise while not having to do it all yourself.
Wow. Well, again, that was very insightful, very selfishly, very helpful for me. So I do appreciate that, Paul. And, obviously with the summer on the horizon, I'll have a little bit more free time on my hands to go all in, so to speak, with my venture and continuing to build my venture. And your insight, very valuable, selfishly to me and hopefully to my audience. So without, again, valuable insight throughout the entire podcast. And I do appreciate that. And you diving into your, backstory, very much appreciate that. One final question I'll ask for you, because I'm just really curious because of the new venture that you've started, is what's the competition like with the wall printer, specifically with other companies that are doing something comparable to that?
Yeah. So great question. I don't have such a big ego that I think I'm the only one who's doing something. And if I'm successful, other people will look at that and say, wow, that's pretty cool. Same thing that goes to my customers who invest in my business in these products. They're worried about those same things. Who else is doing this? What's my competition and all that? When I was first approached, I was actually approached by a competitor of mine, a German company that builds a competitive product. And they approached me because of my background in taking products from foreign countries, introducing them into the American audience. And they wanted me to come on as a salesperson to bring their product to market here. Because it turns out that there's only 5 companies in the world that manufacture this type of technology. There are 2 Chinese companies, one of which is the oldest in the business, more than 10 years old, with more than, when I first got into this in 2019, 3 years ago, it had about 500 customers. In part because of my efforts, they have about 1,000 customers today, 3 years later. As I've grown to 85 new customers in Canada and the United States and South America that have purchased this machine in the last 2 years. We lost a year because of COVID, nobody doing anything, especially with a product that nobody's ever heard about before. But back to your question, there are 5 companies in the world, 2 Chinese, 1 German, 1 Indian, and 1 Australian. The Australian company, we can dismiss them right away, as I did my homework and research on who else is doing this, because they they don't have a product, to be perfectly blunt. They have a beautiful website. They had an idea for a product because they saw the success that the Chinese company was doing in Southeast Asia. But they were a venture-backed company which could be another lesson for your students. They lost their funding early on, and so they're really dead in the water with a product that they don't have, just a prototype, but they have no way to manufacture any products. There's the original Chinese company I described. There's another Chinese company. The Chinese don't only copy us, they copy themselves too. So when they see a company with a successful product, they say, oh, I can do that too. But this other company was a laser engraving company that saw the success of the first company doing it, and they don't really have any support or technical expertise to really produce a product that can be supported and is competitive. The Indian product is a very lightweight aluminum home hobby solution, not designed for a commercial enterprise that wants to use a machine day in and day out. So I dismiss that one. And then there's the German company. No disrespect to you or anybody in your audience with German heritage at all. I drive a BMW. I cook with Henkel knives. I fancy a well-engineered product. But just because something says made in Germany, it shouldn't be twice the price of something of comparable value. And in fact, as I could not make a deal with the German company that approached me initially, and I sent a company that works for me to China to kind of kick the tires, so to speak, of this one Chinese company that I selected to be the one that I wanted to represent here and actually invest in and buy. I'm a co-owner and co-inventor on 3 patents for this company now, and which is unusual for an American to be able to be a co-inventor with a Chinese company, but I am. And I'm very proud of that and proud of the relationship I built with this company, whose products are excellent. And they ticked all the right boxes. Can they produce the quantity of machines I wanted? What were the differentiating features of this product versus the German one, which was a quality product, but it did not print with white ink. Something I learned very early on is something very important if you want to print on glass or dark surfaces and have the colors really pop out. You want to apply white behind the traditional CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black colors that most printers have. This would print with white ink, which was a very unique patented solution that we have. And then the resolution. The German product printed at 600 DPI. We printed 1440 DPI. We also have the floor printer, and we have another type of wall printer that uses water-based ink, which is good for indoor printing and porous surfaces. Doesn't print on glass, tile, metal, plastic, but that's a different type of printer. Advantage is that it prints much faster because the ink dries in the air as opposed to the UV ink printers that I described earlier. That's our main printer that prints anywhere, indoors, outdoors, any surface, but it prints slower, at 20 square feet an hour. But nevertheless, this company is the one I selected. And there is competition, but right now, we've got a 3-year head start on anybody because one of the reasons why I was approached by the German company and one of the reasons I jumped on this opportunity to introduce wall printing to the United States and Canada and South America is because these companies didn't want to come across the pond, so to speak. They didn't want to travel across the Atlantic or the Pacific to the Western Hemisphere because the products do require support, parts, training, installation, help. We actually manufacture our own inks here in the United States. Many of the components, the computer components, are American-made. Electric components are American-made that we've added to the printer. That the bulk of which is and the parts are manufactured in China. But we've got just a great product, and we've got a 3-year head start on anybody. And I'll match we in fact have had companies with the German wall pen product buy ours when ours produced better results than that one did. So very proud of the company, the team I built up, and being able to respond to questions like that. Very, very good one, William.
Thank you. I had a little bit of practice, but Paul, that was amazing. Amazing having you back on the show. And, this is year end now for us here at Sussex County Technical School. So now it's time to start planning out the 2022, 2023 school year and budgeting for items that we'd like to have on our wish list for next year. But that is definitely something that I'm going to pass along to my graphic design teacher is the wall printer. And you can find out if you're listening, audience members, you can find out more at thewallprinter.com. to check out Paul Barron and his product, the wall printer, and like he said, the floor printer. That's probably on the website too, right, Paul?
It is. And again, I encourage you, I didn't want this to be a sales pitch, really. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy talking to you, William. And, if it is something that's right for the school, or any of the audience that's listening, or their parents or businesses, certainly, happy to take that conversation further. But really, this is about the journey. And I really want your audience to feel free if there's anything that they heard that makes them want to connect with me or just to be in my network. They're welcome to join me. This also is not an advertisement for LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is a good professional network. And as your audience goes out into the world, Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Reddit, those are all great social media outlets. But if you're professional and you want to find people who have the similar paths that you or want to explore other paths, LinkedIn is a great place. And I welcome people to connect with me.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Again, a pleasure having you on the Stock Showdown podcast. Look forward to maybe circling back, maybe in about 6 months, see how we're doing and again, touch base. But without further ado, this is the end of the podcast with Paul Barron and yours truly, Wandy, on the Stock Showdown podcast, signing off. God bless.